Thank you for joining us on the Southwest Florida Business Podcast. I'm your host, Chris, and today we're joined by Bryce Lawrence from Vanguard Partners. And it was an interesting conversation because we got to dig into the different aspects of running a business that a lot of people don't think about in terms of cash flow, how to make sure that you're putting aside the correct amount of money after you collect an invoice or a deposit versus after you finish, and when you can pay yourself, and how to accurately think about these things. So that way, when you're running your business, it's not just about, hey, let me use the money I made now to pay myself, and then you've got to work constantly to have future jobs pay for your current expenses. So we kind of talk about that loop that most people get into and some of the ways to address it. This was a quick one. We actually ran out of time, so we're going to do another one of these at some point here in the near future. But yeah, if you're interested in learning more about this, especially if you're a construction company or a service company based here in Southwest Florida, reach out to Bryce. He knows quite a bit about this stuff, and he's got a really easy to understand way of putting all this together. So without further ado, please enjoy this episode with Bryce from Vanguard Partners. This episode is brought to you by Southwest Florida Podcast. We help businesses make marketing videos. Now, a lot of businesses see the value in video content, but they don't know where to start. Filming, editing, posting on social media, these can take up a lot of time and they can be pretty frustrating, and that's where we come in. We work with businesses to highlight the value they bring to their customers and share that online. Now, we've created the Marketing Manager's Guide to Video Content that you can download for free by following the link below or scanning the QR code on your screen. Now, enjoy the show. Bryce, thanks for joining me, man. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, man. You got a sweet studio, man. This place is awesome.
Thanks.
Definitely.
I said this before to Angie and Dre, but I feel like this has been like almost a year in the making that we started talking about different stuff. And so, yeah, I'm glad we can finally do this.
No doubt.
All right, so one of the things I want to jump into just right off the bat is I know that you work with construction companies, service-based businesses, everything like that.
Yeah.
Can we dive into knowing the numbers? Like, this seems like something that you're trying to yell from the rooftop. So what do you mean by knowing the numbers? Why is that important for business owners? Let's go from there.
You can't do anything without knowing your numbers. You stay stuck where you're at if you don't understand your numbers. There's a million people have said this, but the language of business is accounting. And if you don't understand how to read a profit and loss, if you don't know how to read a balance sheet and budget, then you don't know where you're going because you don't even know where you've been. So it's really difficult to know if this is scalable. Is what I'm doing right now working, and will it work in the next chapter of the business? There's 6 areas of any company that I focus on, but the top 3 are vision, people, and data. And data it's got to be where we start. We've got a vision and a plan for this thing long term, to pass it on, to sell it, to do something with it, to build something incredible. And it's the number one piece. We've got to start there. But the next thing is we've got to make sure that we're actually getting there, right?
Yeah.
And so, and I can't stress this enough, and I know it sounds so cliche because everybody talks about this stuff, that really understands business, but it is not possible for a coach, a consultant, for a CPA or an accountant or a, chief financial officer or your operations manager to actually help your business move forward if they don't understand where you're currently at and where you've been. Yeah.
Okay. So I guess why do most people not know that?
Because they started something, because they were good at a skill set, right? Like most GCs, roofers, electrician, plumbing, AC, whatever it is, they were really good at that, right? Or they were an operations guy or a field manager at their previous job, and they're like, I can do this. Or maybe they sold for a little while for one of those companies. Like, why don't I go just do this myself? And that makes sense, and it really works in the beginning, And if you want to be a 1 to 3 or 1 to 5 man crew, then sure, that's great. And there's nothing wrong with that, like at all. If that's what you want out of life, that's incredible. Go do it. But if you really want to move and you've got a crazy vision for this thing, there's some skills that you've never understood before. You've never had to use them. And why would they have taught you, So unless you went to school for, finance, then you wouldn't have that skill set, or somebody taught you or passed it down to you, then why would you know?
Yeah.
But I even have a problem with a lot of the guys that went to school for this stuff.
Why?
Because it's not practical.
So it's kind of like trying to bridge a gap between the people operating in the real world don't know how to get to the real data, and then the people operating in like the educational world don't know how this.
Like they have the head knowledge of a profit and loss and a balance sheet and doing taxes. Like most financial degrees are all about understanding how to file your taxes, and like your CPA and your accountant, most people bring a third party accountant or CPA into the picture to help them run their business, but that's not what they do. They come in and they okay, let me clean your books up and file your taxes for you. And if you've got a really good CPA, or tax professional, they're going to help you move money around so that you keep as much as you possibly can when it's time to pay Uncle Sam.
Sure.
But that doesn't have anything to do with scaling your business and growing your business. And I argue with accountants and CPAs every day of my life.
Really?
Yeah, until they really get to know me and we get on the same page and they start trying to ask more questions. But yeah, there's just a constant push because the practicality of running the numbers, and they feel like I'm stepping on their toes, of course,
What are the practical numbers that you're looking at, and why are these important to look at?
So the number one thing to every growing business, any business, is cash. Sure. Right? You got to have cash in the bank or else you're going nowhere. And there's a safety net of cash that needs to be there. And people think you're risk adverse when you talk about the word safety and having enough cash on hand. And there's so many different opinions on leveraging, debt and all this stuff. But there's still a certain dollar amount that you need to have on hand depending on the size of your business and operation, right?
Okay.
And it's a minimum of 3 months of operating expenses. So whatever that looks like, if you do not have 3 months of operating expenses, and so for example, if you're a contractor that does $1 million a month, right? And say 30% of that is materials, well, I don't include materials in my operating expenses because if I'm not selling work, then I don't have to buy materials, right? My operating cost is my overhead. It's my trucks, it's my gas, it's the rental for the office space, it's payroll. A lot of people don't include payroll into their operating expense.
Really?
Which is crazy to me.
Okay.
A lot of CPAs and accountants don't as well. If they're asked what the operating overhead cost is, they don't put payroll in there because you can fire employees if you needed to. But I'm like,
but it doesn't
but
really
that destroys
work.
The business.
Yeah.
If things are tough, I don't have to lay people off. I want to retain good people. So if we go through a couple of rocky months or something like COVID happens or something crazy, we need financial safety to make sure that we can get through those moments. And it's at least 3 months, closer to 6, depending on the business and the industry that you're in. Sure. You might need more or less cash, right? So take that overhead expense, multiply it by 3. That's what should be in your operating account. And this is another big thing, most businesses, especially contractors, have 1 or 2 bank accounts. And everything goes in there. One of the biggest problems with contractors specifically is they have this notion that sales fixes all. And to a degree, they're right, but you run into a really big problem with that, especially when scaling. And this is where numbers are so important to understand. Having separate bank accounts for separate things and understanding where money needs to move from one account to the other is wildly important. And it amps me up to a degree because it's like stealing from Peter to pay Paul a lot of the time is what these guys do. And they get in this situation where they take deposits on new jobs. A lot of them take up to 50% deposits. And I guarantee you about 90% of contractors run their business this way. They take a deposit on a new job. They put it in their operating account and start paying their employees out of it, paying their overhead costs. And when it comes time 6 months later to install that roof or install those exterior windows, because it's been on back order this whole time, there's no money for it. Right. So they've spent it all already. And they think that because the money's there, they have more money to play with. They can grow their company, go out and hire more employees to continue growing. But that's not their money. That's a client's money for the materials that they just, the deposit that they just got on that 50% job. And so they don't reserve it. They don't know, and they're not calculating where everything should be. It's just in one account, right?
Yeah.
And so it comes time, and now they have to sell another job to pay for the materials for this job, and everybody does it, and it's wild. But they get to a point where now they're racking up their terms with their vendors to go, hey, give me 30-day terms. Now I've got maybe $100,000 worth of credit or a credit line that's racked up, and now my credit line limit is there, so I really can't buy more, and my vendors aren't giving me any more materials because I got to pay them down.
Okay.
And there's so many contractors in that same boat. Unfortunately, come to me at the last minute.
Yeah.
When it's too late.
When they realize it's a problem.
Yeah, and there's dug a lot of people out of that hole, but you have to know your numbers and where you're at. And that's the other problem. Their numbers aren't even accurate. Like if you pull a profit and loss, legitimately 99% of small businesses right this second, if I pulled a profit and loss or a balance sheet out of QuickBooks, whatever financial software they use, those numbers are not accurate. They're not up to date. The money's in the wrong accounts. You can't get a good picture of what's happening. Yeah.
That makes sense, because especially when you're running all these things and you don't know the back end, you don't necessarily know where all these things go. Yeah. And you look at a lot of these softwares and a lot of these systems that are supposed to help you, but it is pretty daunting to look at them, not know where all this stuff is supposed to go, and look at those expenses. And then, with that sales fixes all kind of mindset, it makes sense, because you kind of are like, all right, got the deposit, things are good, cool. Yeah. Can pay the house, can pay all this stuff. And then when that time comes, you're not even remotely in the same headspace. You've already moved on. You probably like emotionally checked out from that job, and now it's time to do it.
Absolutely.
Okay. So do you see this? Is this something that ends up like burying companies? Is this
it puts people out of business all the time. Yeah, and not only that, it's the stress that's added to already running a business. Yeah. I mean, the reason that I'm so passionate about this is because I grew up in an entrepreneurial home, and I watched my parents struggle through business my entire life. My dad was a GC really early on, owned multiple businesses outside of that. My mom was a florist, just done a lot of different things. Even down here in Naples, my dad owned a company called Cynthia's Party World, did rentals for big parties and stuff. Okay. But I watched how stressful it was on my parents to run their business. And when one of them failed, their factory, they the last one my dad really got up and running is a manufactured a biodegradable chum. And so you could reuse it like a bar of soap and stick it in the water and pull it back out. It was a really cool product. And the factory burnt down. His partner stole everything, emptied the bank account, so we never saw him again. And even to this day, right? I think I was 13, 14. It was in 2007 at the same time, right? So went and had everything in the world overnight. Parents lost everything. The big house, moved into a little house. The cars got repossessed. And my parents' marriage ultimately failed. And so like that has gotten me so passionate. And it's, of course, a number of other things. Sure. But it's the number one reason people get divorced is finances, right? Especially business owners. And that strain of running a business together, it getting on the same page with your spouse as to where we're heading and understanding our numbers, even on a personal level, is so important to any marriage, let alone when you're playing with millions of dollars, Yeah. And maybe your business isn't that big, but it's still nonetheless, they're much bigger dollars than what's in your personal accounts. And if you don't know them, it adds another level of stress to your marriage, Yeah.
Well, that uncertainty, it always, if you don't know it, it always feels like the other shoe is going to drop at any point, and you really have no insight into when that's going to happen, how that's going to happen. It's stressful. Yeah. I mean, like, so you've been in these different businesses, you've seen them, and then you've started your own businesses, you've worked for other companies. Mm-hmm. I mean, how did you kind of go this path, and how did you kind of figure out these core pieces?
Yeah, definitely. Everything that I do, it's I've learned it. I didn't make it up myself. Sure. Right. I don't like recreating the wheel at the end of the day. I think it's a really silly thing to do.
And this is literally
the wheel. That you could find that exact information in 20 different, business books at the end of the day to teach you to understand how to run a business effectively. And so had some incredible mentors along the way. I was an operations manager for some local landscaping companies here in Naples, Florida, and helped them really grow. I was actually the operations manager for our church for a little while as well. And just understand process, people, data, and so that developed into me really helping these landscaping companies grow, and had a few other contractors and trades reaching out, trying to poach me from those companies, and kept saying no. I was enjoying helping and watching this thing move forward, and finally said yes to one of them on a consulting basis, and it turned out really well for the company and myself, obviously financially. And so went down that route. Another one heard about it, and so I said yes to another one, and it kept happening and snowballing. And somehow I opened up a company about 4 years ago, and now we're here today. Yeah, man.
That's awesome. Yeah. So how many companies, I guess, have you helped so far, and like how many do you actively work with at a time?
Yeah, great question. So over the past 4 years, I've touched about 50 different companies. I've got a life cycle of right around 12 months. And my relationship changes with them at that point, because they shouldn't need me anymore, not to that level at least.
Sure.
Should have implemented those systems, trained their team, and they should be in a much better place. And so actively right around that 15 mark, I don't like going too far past that, like full on services. And we've got some other options as well. They're just financial. They don't include, us meeting with your teams and really helping write your process and systems.
Got it.
Yeah, man.
Got it. That's cool. Yeah. You enjoy it?
I love it, man. I'm super passionate about it. And I get bored really quick, like really, really fast.
So that's actually nice that you can you don't have the super long term.
Yeah.
So what's the process like to go through this? Because I know you literally have this process, and I'll give you a quick testimonial. So you showed me this one day when we were talking. I think that was like one of the first times we ever met.
Really?
We ended up just like talking. I told you what I did, and you showed me all the spreadsheets and operational flows and everything.
Yeah.
Just something about the way you were talking about this. I was like, all right, this guy knows his shit. But like you sent me this after on like the process of what it's like to work with you, intro meeting, focus day, vision building, all this stuff. Mm-hmm. And I basically stole this from you for
that's awesome.
Like a project I was doing, and I won the contract. And it
Come
was like,
on now.
Yeah, it was like a pretty good sized deal.
That's
and I
awesome,
basically
man.
just like modeled it after this, and they're like, okay, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Dude, I waited 6 months to put like a friggin' process onboarding map.
That's awesome. I mean, I stole that same thing from somebody else,
good.
So it works.
All right.
Man.
Yeah.
It's not recreate the wheel here, so it's good.
That's awesome. Well, so, all right. So what is it like for people that work with you, and then when they come to you and actually start working with you, like where do you start to figure out where they need help, like why they would even work with you and how you can help them?
Yeah, it's a great question. So intro day is just about us getting to know each other, and it's if we're a good fit to work together. But the moment we say yes, the client's like, hey, this is what we need. We have something called a focus day. It's a 3 to 4 hour meeting put on the calendar, and we break down everything. It's really me learning your business. Okay. I need to get into the nuts and bolts of what's happening before I can do anything, right? So day one, we actually break your structure down, the entire company. So we lay it out into marketing, sales, operations, and finance, and maybe if you've got some other departments, and list out every task that would ever happen in any of those departments, and find out who's doing what and put those people back into it. And a lot of the time, we even immediately on day one realize that there's a lot of overlap and inefficiencies in their structure and their team.
Okay.
And so we'll start moving that stuff around on day one. Next big thing is to identify the big issues in the company, like the big projects that if we get these 5 to 10 projects done in the next 90 days, the company's going to be in a much different place than it is right now. So that might be implementing a new software, writing new processes for the way we do business, hiring the next employee that's needed at the moment, implementing a budget and KPIs, whatever those things are. We pull all the good, bad, and ugly out of the leadership team's heads, throw it at the board and argue through it, figure it all out, and really nail down and agree this is what the next 90 days looks like. And then the next big thing is we go over our meeting agenda, and we meet on a weekly basis, same agenda every single week, go over numbers, go over wins and losses from the past week, and then problem solve together, all the small issues.
You feel like that like repetition and that expectation that you're going to go over the same thing, is that a big part of it so you can as a leadership team kind of focus your efforts on what's going on?
Yeah, and you have to. So we review the same numbers every week. Did we hit our goals last week? And I look at numbers on a weekly basis, not just a monthly.
Okay.
Because if we look at it for a monthly, and most accountants send you, if you got a good one, they'll send you your numbers for last month on the 15th of this month, right? So I can go review what happened last month, but it's too late. This last month, it's done and over. So we look at numbers every single week to make sure that we're on track to hit our goal for the month. So we look at those first, make sure we're on track with our KPIs, key performance indicators, and then also really dive into any issues that came up. So the small stuff, right? So it doesn't turn into big problems. We nip it in the butt immediately with employees, with customers, internal communication. And then we review our quarterly projects every single week to make sure they're on track. You know?
So what, like, when you break this out, right, and you like go, okay, marketing, sales, operations, whatever the different departments are for that particular business, like what are some of the things that pop up almost 90% of the time? Like what's like the most common one that somebody could look for in their business even before going through this process, just so they're aware this stuff can pop up?
Yeah, great question. First of all, we watch numbers for every department, right? So like there's a number that represents if that department is doing good, so that we know if there's an issue with the sales numbers, well, there's an issue with the process of the sales department, right? Okay. If there's an issue in the operations, meaning we're not finishing work out fast enough or getting, completed work done quick enough, we'll know because the numbers, we didn't finish out enough work last week. So that to start there is really big. But going back to your question, when it comes to structure, in those different departments, one of the biggest pain points, especially for contractors, is the handoff between sales and operations. So you sell the job, and that handoff smoothly transitioning for the client and the company to make sure it happens on time, all the information is communicated, is wildly important. And this is where it gets really messy. And going back to the numbers, and I talk about it all the time, it's almost annoying how much I go back to this, but it's so important, is that, okay, if you're a contractor and I got a $10,000 job and take a 50% deposit on it. So I got a $5,000 check from you to do, some new flooring and redo your bathroom. I take that $5,000 check, and most of them just stick it in their bank account, like we were talking about earlier. Well, what you need to be doing with that $5,000 is putting it in a deposits account, in a separate account, not in your operating account. And then you also need to go into your financial software for that project, whether it's a CRM like Notify or Builder Trend or ServiceTitan or House Call Pro, whatever you're using, or even QuickBooks, and create the bills for that job that you are going to owe on the money that you've received. So if I owe out on this job, maybe I've got 30% in labor and 30% in materials, I need to go create my subcontractor bills that I'm going to pay my subcontractors for, or my internal labor. I need to go create the bills for the materials that I'm going to purchase on that job. So I know how much money is reserved for materials, how much money is reserved for labor, and keep those in those accounts.
So is that, in that case, if you got 30% for materials, 30% for labor, and this is a $10,000 job, is that of the total cost or total cost of the deposit?
The deposit.
Okay.
Because I haven't collected the full amount yet. So most of these softwares, you can create POs for the entire job, but I'm going to create bills on those purchase orders for just the amount that I've collected so far.
So in this case, you get the 5,000 in, you got 30 and 30. So you create two bills for $1,500. So that way, okay, essentially, like I've got a $2,000 leeway here in terms of like real world cash. And then
like
the other 5,000 is either, you'll have to cover some extra gaps there in that 2,000, but that's where you can like
and
bring
there's
that
different
to
ways
the bank.
to do this depending on the business, of course, right?
But it's like a way that you can look at what's happening in reality now, what you have versus what you can expect to, I'll call it, lose in the next, or spend in the next X amount of time before you actually collect anything that you can really view as profit.
Exactly.
Okay.
So now most people take that $5,000 and stick it in their operating account and start paying their bills or paying their debts down or using it for whatever, reinvesting into the company, but that's not what it's for yet.
Yeah.
And so we've got to reserve that money, put that money in those accounts. And now if I do that with every single dollar that I receive, whether it's a deposit or a draw or a final payment, and I create the bills that I owe on that money at that moment in time when it goes into my bank account, I can pull an AP and an AR report that's accurate and up to date. AP meaning accounts payable. What do I owe out? My bills, right? Mm-hmm. So right this second, how much does my company as a whole owe? Maybe the bill's not due yet, but owe off of the money that I've received, right?
Okay.
And the same thing with my AR. So my next payments, I'm going to put draft, an invoice in my system so I know that I've got upcoming money and here's the date that I should look at receiving it. Even though I don't know for sure that's when I'm going to send the invoice to my client, I'm estimating that's when my next draw payment is due. So I can forecast how much money is going to be in my bank account in the next few months. So now I've got a really good idea of all my bills because the bills are dated. I've got a good idea of all my invoices because the invoices are dated. So I can forecast into the future and see what my financial situation is going to be, not just yesterday, not even just today, but into the future, depending on how far out you book work, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so this. All right, let me see if I got this right, because this almost seems like the key to understanding cash flow in reality. So you have the amount of money that comes in, that's the cash that you have now, but that, not that it doesn't mean anything, but it's not indicative of the reality of the long-term situation. So you have the cash that comes in, let's say it's 50%, it's $5,000. So you go in, you put all the expenses in that you know for sure are going to happen. Maybe you even put in some buffer, whatever it might be for the real use case, but you can put that into like an accounts payable report so you can see what you're definitely going to have to spend. So then you can put this extra $5,000 in the accounts receivable estimated. So now you can look at not only where you're at, but where you'll need to spend money, and then the anticipated money that will come in on top of that to offset it. So you can get a gauge of like kind of the ongoing health of your business in terms of where cash is coming in, not just looking at a bank account number and thinking that's
how everybody operates. They just log into their bank account and say, hey, how much am I comfortable with today being in that account?
Yeah.
Now if your company just took on a ton of new growth and made some crazy sales, well, that number needs to increase, So with all the companies I work with in my personal companies, I've got separate bank accounts and I know exactly the dollar amount to the penny that's supposed to be in every one of those accounts at every moment.
Yeah.
And it brings about a safety and a peace for not just me, but my wife, for the people that I work with, for my partners, for my employees, and everybody in our world, and even the operating account. That's it, when this stuff is where it's supposed to be, it gets fun. Right? Like that's when business gets like exciting because now there's something to play with. If my operating account's supposed to have $300,000 and at the moment it goes over $300,000, I'm spending that money. I'm either taking a distribution as an owner or I'm putting it and reinvesting it back into the company. And we have plans to do with that money as well,
Okay.
So we've already planned out strategically, like what is the next growth phase? Now, what are we going to do with that? It crosses the $300,000 limit in this case, and we're at $350,000. Okay. Well, that $50,000, we can go hire the next employee that we need to hire, that next big position that takes a ton off of my plate as an owner. And I can go and focus on the next problem. I can buy the next truck that I need, the next asset. We can go purchase a building or whatever it needs the company has.
Sure.
Or I can go enjoy it and take distributions confidently.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you're not playing that game. There's no like guilt game that goes on of, hey, well, I'm not sure, or, I know that this kind of dipped into it, but maybe I can use this, but we'll figure it out with sales. And then, actually and then you start making it like, I almost call it like the spreadsheet projections for sales. It's like magic. Like people look at it like, oh, by the end of this year, we'll be here. And it's like, how?
But why? Yeah, like exactly.
And it's funny now that I'm like stepping back from this as a business and going and looking for sales roles at these companies. And I talk to them about like, what are their goals? What are they trying to do? There's like, sometimes you talk to them, it's like, we're going to hit this number by this time. It's like, it's like your strategy right now is a wish.
You're dreaming. And we have vision meetings every single year as well. And you need to, so that the leadership team's on the same page and they understand the decisions along the way. Like, why did we go open another location? This one isn't even where we want it to be yet, you know? Yeah. So getting everybody on the same page with that stuff is super important. But if you sit down for a few minutes once a year with your leadership team, write a few things down and forget about it, because you will if you don't go over that vision again and again and again and keep it in front of everybody, it's worthless. And again, it's dreaming when there's no practical plan attached to that. I'm like, okay, we're going to hit 10 million this year. Cool. Okay, but how? You know, like, where's the plan attached to that? Are we tracking our KPIs weekly? Our weekly KPIs and the goal attached to them should represent a $10 million business, you know? And are we on track to do that? So, man, it's all just dreaming until, you know, you put feet to it.
For sure. So that's part of it. I know the vision is part of it, but is that so taking that and making that like practical, real world. So you go to these businesses, or they come to you. Part of it is talk through the vision of where you are versus where you want to be. You can dig into where you are now, but if you've got this vision, okay, like, is it like, let's back engineer what you need to do in order to get there, the resources, the sales, the reducing operational costs, like all that stuff to get there. Is that where you start in terms of like bridging the gap between like the fantasy or the vision and like the reality?
Yeah, it's budgeting at the end of the day. Okay. And so like, okay, we've got a plan, and I'm a dreamer. I dream wild. I've got a few friends that I'm like comfortable dreaming around. Yeah. And we dream up crazy wild dreams, but like we have to be, people are like, be realistic. And I'm not one of those people that I'm like knocking your dream down in any way, shape, or form, but throw $100 million out as a goal, you know, in 12 months, and you're doing 2 right now. Like, it's kind of stupid, you know? So let's be somewhat realistic. I'm going to shoot for the stars, and hopefully we reach the moon at the end of the day. But yeah, when the goal is written down and the leadership looks at it and says, yeah, that's where we're heading, and we all agree together, like, that's a really cool moment. But now the work goes in, right? And so we take that dream, we break it down into weekly KPIs. We take that dream, we break it down into a monthly budget, and we watch it. And whatever numbers you pay attention to, they increase. That's just the way it goes. Okay. So like, if you constantly and consistently, and everything that we do and preach and teach is simple. Like, I am not some genius. I didn't make any of this up. Like, I'm not the smartest guy in the room. It's hardly. I've just really worked this craft and realized that whatever you focus on, it grows. Like, that's how things work. And so it's the consistent repetition of, we are going to meet every single week, the same day, same time. We're going to look at the same exact numbers, and we're going to figure out why they're not where they're supposed to be. And if they're not, we're going to fix it together, and we're going to move forward. Yeah, man. I mean, that's really it as a whole picture. But the other side of this is the people part.
Yeah.
Right.
How so?
It's all still a dream without the right people.
Yeah. If you don't, okay. Can you elaborate on that? What do you mean?
Yeah. Data is my skill set, and it's one skill set, but I realized really quickly I was never going to be able to actually influence or impact businesses without like relational intelligence, and getting the right people around you is wildly important. And I'm almost just as proud of that when it comes to business and like the right settings. I'm very different in certain settings. But I have to get everybody on the same page. And that is like the most difficult part of my job. And all the people on my team, like, you got a husband and wife, they're never on the same financial page personally, let alone a business, right?
Yep.
And I keep saying that because I'm married and watch my family go through it. And there's so many businesses that I work with there. It's a spouse, you know, it's a married couple that are running it together to some level, you know? But even if it's not that, even partners, you know, even your leadership and your management team, if they don't know your numbers and they're not involved in the vision, your lead executive team, your managers, whoever they are, even if it's just a 5 to 10 person team, you got one of those guys that's really close with you running the business, they need to be dreaming with you. They need to take it on themselves, and they need to see the future of the company and their position in it, and how they're going to help accomplish that vision, And so,
but they need to know so you're saying they need to know the numbers too.
I am wildly transparent with everybody on my team. So my own personal business, I own 3 different companies right now, and every single one of them, I'm wildly transparent with the numbers, and people as business owners are scared. They're terrified to share it. One, because they don't even know them, right?
Sure.
And they don't track them. They don't understand them. And so they can't communicate them to their teams. But I stretch like that belief in the businesses that I work with every day. I'm like, your guys need to know where you're at right now. They're like, they're going to see these big numbers and think I'm killing it. I'm like, they might.
Yeah.
And that's a risk. But at the same time, like, they can't help you fulfill the dream that you have if they don't understand what's going on.
Well, and if they see these big numbers, but they understand where it's going, why it's going out, all those things, it's less of like sticker shock when they do find that stuff out.
They're going to see your numbers sooner or later. Yeah. They know your price tags.
Yeah.
Whether you want them to or not, you're not going to hide that stuff from everybody.
Well, it's scary. It's scary too, as like a business owner, to go out and say like, I don't know this stuff. That was something, like, again, as I'm like scaling this back and reorganizing what this thing is, it's interesting that for a long time I was super hesitant to tell anybody like, hey, like I'm struggling with this, or like, I'm not sure where this is going or how to do this. And I did that for over a year. And then once I finally was like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing, dude. Like, and I went and asked people for help and told them like, here's what's going on. Here's the problem I'm trying to solve. It's amazing how many people will actually just help you and steer you in the right direction.
People want to help, man.
Yeah.
What's funny is, as well, is if you're not learning, you're typically not moving forward. Like, it's not like you get stagnant. Mm-hmm. If you don't have a hunger to grow, you're probably, I'll tell you what your numbers are, the same as they've been for the past few years.
Yeah.
Like 9 times out of 10. And so I'm always trying, like, I know quite a bit about when it comes to this stuff, but there's so much that I don't have a clue about, and I've got people around me, and I'm very transparent with them too. Like, if I don't understand the language, if I don't understand what's going on in the room, I'm going to ask. I'm not afraid to ask that question. You have to.
Yeah.
I was going to stay where you're at.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's maybe the scariest thing.
Yeah.
I don't know. For me, it is.
It is. It's definitely terrifying. And again, I see it in teams all the time. You got the office manager who's been comfortable sitting in the corner for years, and the company and the owners are like, it's time to grow. And she's like, I don't want to grow, or, that's an attitude thing. But maybe you've got people in the room that they feel threatened in some way, shape, or form. And they don't want to expose themselves of not knowing what they're supposed to know, or what they think they're supposed to know. So they don't ask the questions.
Or whatever you're trying to do is a threat to me because it replaces me. Like, I had that in software all the time. It's like, no, the goal isn't to replace your job. It's just, instead of spending 6 hours doing maintenance tracking paperwork on your plane, that can be 15 minutes. So you can go do other stuff. All those things that you say you want to do, you can go do those. But then it also comes down to, is like, a lot of times people will use that as a way to not evolve. Like,
absolutely.
It's interesting, like, thinking back and being honest with myself of,
for sure,
hey, like, actually maybe the goal was to not have this work in some way, or I didn't feel comfortable having it. So you kind of move towards your actual goal, even though you don't want to admit that. It's a shitty thing to have that realization, but kind of need to have that wake up call.
For sure.
Does that make sense?
It does. And that's where the relational intelligence comes in. Like, you have to know the people that you're talking to in the entire room. Like, a lot of the time I'll walk into a company and I've only met the owner, and now I'm sitting with 6 people on a leadership team that have never met me before. I'm some young kid, I'm not that young anymore. But relatively to most leadership teams. And, they look at me like, what the heck are you going to do?
Yeah.
Like, what are you going to teach me, arms crossed? And Now I've got to break those walls down and build a relationship with everybody in the room in a matter of a few minutes. That's a fun thing to do.
Yeah.
And it's a game for me at this point, but it has to be done because there's a huge defense up most of the time.
Well, those are, it's funny in like the sales methodology I look at, they call them landmines. So it's like uncovering resources that the company has, like whether those are political and understanding that, financial energy to do it, but by like building those relationships and knowing where people stand, you kind of uncover those landmines before they blow up in your face, because you don't want to be 3 months into a process and realizing 2/3 of the people on that team are not in agreement with what's going on.
Without a doubt.
Okay, so that's where the vision comes in right at the beginning.
Yeah, we got to get on the same page.
Okay.
And if you're not, you know it, if you got the wrong people in the room. And honestly, like that's another side of the people side thing. It's right people and right seat. So what I mean by that is, do you have the right people for the company? And that's characteristics, that's core values. Like, who makes good people to work with our leadership team and our owners? What do we absolutely like hate? We can't stand, drives you up the wall. And then as a vision piece, like if they can't picture themselves in the vision that the owner has, it is wildly obvious in every meeting. In so many ways, they're just, disgruntled. There's always a problem. There's always a disagreement. You have to get rid of those people.
Yeah.
There's two things that you can do in any company if you want to grow it. And the only thing to do with a company, to grow a company, is having the right people. So you can either hire more if you have the financial resource, or you have to replace.
Okay.
If your company's not working right now, there's definitely structure things. There's financial things that need to take place. But if it's not growing, it's been stagnant for any period of time, you do not have the right people.
Interesting. That's got to be a tough
or you have a completely bad business model, but that's a whole separate topic.
Yeah, I've done that before. So
for sure. Yeah. Yeah.
And so what's that conversation like with owners and teams, and when you uncover that?
Yeah. Very straightforward.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not afraid to lose my job at the end of the day, because I'm here to help. I'm here to help your business grow. My name's attached to it. And so we have hard conversations. I've had business owners that are handing their business to their kids and had to sit down and tell them to get the heck out of the way, and they've run it their entire lives. They're the one that built it. Like, it's time to step aside, and those are hard conversations, but I think everybody knows. Like, almost every time I've had that conversation, like, this key player that's generating most of your revenue is destroying your company and stopping you from moving forward, and you need to fire him. That's not fun. It's not fun to hear, but almost 9 times out of 10, the owner's like, yeah, I know.
It's not usually a surprise.
It's never a surprise. It's attitude. It's, they're not team players. Usually the person that needs to go is their top producer.
Really?
Yeah, because they think that they've got the companies in the palm of their hand and they can do whatever they want, attitude is wildly more important than results. I mean, it's where it starts first. You build a good team that likes working together, they're going to get results.
Yeah.
Damn.
Dude, what time is it?
I don't know. We've been going, huh?
Yeah. Dude. All right, we got to end this now, because I'm going to ask you a question for 3 hours. So let's do this again. Let's do this again pretty soon, if you're cool with that.
Yeah, man, let's do it.
But before we wrap up, is there anything else that you want to touch on right now? And then also after that, we'll kind of go over like where people can find you and connect with you.
Yeah, man. Anything else I want to touch on now? Thank you for having me on, man. It's been fun for sure.
Dude, this is really cool. Like, and these are it's interesting going back and looking at some of this stuff as you showed it to me, I guess probably 7-8 months ago at this point. Hard to believe that, but damn. But going through this, and kind of when I was running it initially, I was more in that zone of like single owner operator. All this stuff is new to me, still trying to wrap my head around the numbers, how these things work.
For sure.
Money in, money out. Stress that comes with that, the not knowing, the uncertainty of like, the money's there, but I guess it's kind of not. Yeah. And I was smart enough to know like, maybe I shouldn't spend that because I feel like it's not my money yet. Yeah. But not really understanding that. So this got my wheels turning. And then as I realized the current structure of the business that I was running wasn't really sustainable, and as I'm like stepping back and figuring out what that is, like these are some of the core pieces that I'm like implementing as I go to figure out what this next stage is. So we'll definitely keep talking and figure this out. But
if I could give one thing to single owner operators, like this is the one thing that I found out and I wish I'd done a lot sooner, even still, and I'm still doing this more today, is niche out harder and more, like niche out what you do and charge more.
Okay.
Double your price half the time, like legitimately niche out and find out who your client is.
Okay.
That's it.
Yeah, that's okay. It's interesting you're saying that, because that's all right. Yeah, you're number 3. All right, that's
Sweet.
a sign. It's a sign I've been looking for, man. So
no doubt.
Yeah. Thanks,
Sweet,
dude.
man.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate it, man.
This episode is brought to you by SWFL Podcast. We help businesses make marketing videos. Now, a lot of businesses see the value in video content, but they don't know where to start. Filming, editing, posting on social media, these can take up a lot of time and they can be pretty frustrating, and that's where we come in. We work with businesses to highlight the value they bring to their customers and share that online. Now, we've created the Marketing Manager's Guide to Video Content that you can download for free by following the link below or scanning the QR code on your screen.